All right, we are back for another episode on the BLD Financial Podcast. Guys, we have an extraordinary guest here today, a good friend of ours, long past client, Carlos Afanador. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than jet setting around the world, enjoying life, Carlos is a multifamily investor, developer. One of the hardest working guys I know. Is a guy who, pushes past boundaries, gets shit done, who makes it happen. Really a testament to a young person, figuring out a way, finding a way, and getting it done. So, Carlos, before we get into the nitty gritty of what you're doing right now, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about, how you got to where you're at right now?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, man. So I started out in student housing. So I started investing in 2014. I was working selling credit cards at the time. You know those guys who go up to the grocery store and they're like selling just not the sexiest job in the world?
Yeah.
But I was doing that, was able to save up $14,000. That 14 grand got me into my first student house. And I remember at the time people were paying like $500 in rents. And I was like, wait, there's 5 bedrooms in here. So that's $2,500, right? I'm like, but the guy's expenses, the landlord's expenses are about $1,500. So the guy's raking in $1,000 a month. So I really wanted to get in there. But my budget would only allow me to get a 2-bedroom home. So anyway, just kept running a roadblock under roadblock after roadblock. And eventually I found one with the two bedroom house with an unfinished basement. So I decided to add 3 bedrooms to the basement, making it a 5-bedroom home. So that's how I got into my first one.
The Hamilton special.
Exactly. This was in London, but yeah. And then the next one was the year after. At the time, I didn't know about BRRRRing, creative financing. All that stuff was way over my head. So I saved up another down payment, ripping credit cards again. And the following year, I bought another one, same thing, 3 bedrooms, added 2. And then I started growing from there. Eventually, I ended up working in Toronto, got a nice job selling, in tech sales. And then I really wanted to quit the corporate life. And that's when I started reading books, like 4-Hour Work Week, and just kind of, books and podcasts and people like way back in the day, McKeever, Rosehart, those types of guys. I was listening to those guys. I remember painting walls, listening to those guys. And they taught me about the BRRRR model and then I was like, wait a second, I already have 2 properties. So I was already sitting on 2-3 years worth of equity. And, that's when really shit started exploding. So I started buying another one. Then I got into the multifamily space, 4-plex, then a triplex, then duplex. And then eventually I started getting into the midsize multifamily, so 7 unit and 11. We did that deal together. That was a chaotic deal, but anyway, that was a $2 million deal, and for me at the time, that was very scary.
It's all the marbles.
Yeah, exactly. It was all the marbles. Basically, my life's work, just putting it on the line. I had to get a couple of private loans, which was also very scary, completely out of my comfort zone. But fortunately,
you had some collateral on that one too, didn't you?
What's that?
Collateral properties involved in that one, or am I thinking of a different deal?
Yeah. We've done so much weird stuff together.
That was stretched to the...
Yeah, that was stretched for sure. This was 2021. However, I knew that it would work because, well, for one, I talk about this deal often because it's so crazy, but I bought a property for that 7 unit was $63K a door in 2021, which is unheard of. So I knew
the most lights out like multifamily acquisition I think I've ever seen. Yeah, crazy. Well,
exactly.
You bought it from a portfolio, right? Somebody was selling a large amount of buildings.
Exactly. So big developer. I'm talking like 1,000 units. The long story short, the guy died and the family wanted to sell all the assets. These were the smaller assets he had, and me and a couple other guys essentially joined together, and we acquired separate buildings in this portfolio. It just gave us a little more leverage when we're negotiating, but I picked up 2 of them, and those buildings together are worth like 5.5 now. So got in for 2, 5.5 now, BRRRRed it. Obviously you guys know the nitty gritty of that stuff, but anyway, BRRRRed it. And then I was able to scale from there. Now I have, my last exit was a 32 unit building. And all of this has been done without partners. So, never been a big fan of partnership. I don't think it's it's a bad strategy. It just doesn't work for me. I'm also an only child, so maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, and then now I'm doing developments. We can dive into what I'm doing now, but I got 3 developments on the go, and yeah, just looking to continue growing the portfolio and enjoying life. You know, I just turned 32. I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm in, so I just really want to take life more than just money. You know, money's taught me a lot. Getting money has taught me how, like, what's really important, and I'm just trying to, you know, get every juice squeeze out of life as possible right now.
Well, I find it really interesting that once you figure out the recipe for success, so once you figure out, you know, either your purpose and what you want to do, or you have some level of success, and you know, if you're decently young, you realize that, you know, the goal that was money isn't actually the most important thing. You know, it's the time you have and like the things that you do when you're young, because the experience you're doing when you're in your 30s versus, you know, being able to do it when you're in your 50s is going to be a very, very different experience. You're never going to be able to buy being this age again.
100%.
Yeah.
And you know, to that point, I often ask myself, like, what would the 50 or 60-year-old do? Like, what would he do to be back at my age now? And the answer is probably a lot, right?
Anything.
Exactly. Literally anything, right? So again, I'm very fortunate, and I just want to maximize the blessings that I've been provided with. Yeah.
It's really cool to watch, you know, somebody like we kind of launched at the same time. I'd say, when did we launch our business? 2020. And, you know, we saw and we had the opportunity to help a lot of investors, you know, grow, and they really went one of 2 ways. They either, you know, over leveraged and died, or they you know,
And Carlos bought their properties.
they strategically grew. You know, they scaled and they grew, and the opportunity, you know, that we've gone through over the last 4 or 5 years, none of it has been, you know, calm, easy breezy, beautiful, you know, markets. They've all been chaos. You know, we have COVID, and then what happened to COVID, and then rates, and then inflation, and the most successful of us all have always found a way to be able to adapt and to be able to, you know, transition and pivot in different markets to be able to continue to grow. And, you know, one of the main pillars of the successful, you know, entrepreneurs or successful multifamily or developers our age is just your resilience, your ability to be able to take a problem and to, you know, find a solution to that without letting it like actually kill you from stress. You know,
For sure.
I think maybe like this business hardens you a little bit from stress.
Certainly. It's all repetition, right? When you deal with one stressful thing your whole life, it's going to shock you. With 2, it's going to shock you a little less. When you deal with 1,000, you don't even care.
Yeah.
You know, so that, you know, we can dive off a bit, like that transitions into so many places in life, you know, but yeah, it takes a lot to stress me out right now. I have been through obviously a lot of stress, and I have like a tough childhood growing up, but, you know, child of immigrants. So it's like that those challenges actually helped me out a lot in my adult life. But yeah, I'm just grateful that I had those experiences. And then we've all had difficulties, but if you tap into those difficulties, I think it really elevates you. So that's what I've done. And,
I think anyone, sorry to cut you off, but anyone that's made it through starting real estate or starting just before COVID and is still alive today and able to like the ups and downs and the challenges that you've had to deal with, like, just shows the ability, like the grit to stick through it, the, like, you know, just the ability to find and adapt different solutions, different ways to grow capital. Like, some people took a shit kicking over the last like few years, and unfortunately it wasn't all bad decisions. Sometimes it was just purely the worst luck and timing of the market. Some people made probably some decisions they shouldn't have, but you know, those who are still in it today and have had the success you've had, even those that, you know, maybe got caught halfway through, but again, like, just the amount of things that people have had to overcome during that market is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's a lot of fallen soldiers out there right now.
For the homies.
Literally. But I think it's just because they're chasing the sexy parts of real estate, the Ferraris and the yachts and the sexy parts of life, which I obviously understand. But for me, it's always been a love for the game.
Yeah.
Versus a love for the results of the game. I've also never been a flashy guy, which that actually helps. I mean, I spend all my money, or not all, but some of my money into like travel and experiences. I just get a lot more fulfillment out of that than like,
Cars.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of the people who like, if you look at their profile of like the typical profile, obviously everyone's different, but the typical profile is someone who really wanted to get rich quick, like doesn't know what they're doing. They ended up spending money on stupid things, and then now they're out of the game.
You got to keep working.
Yeah, or out of the country, running away from people, or whatever. Depends on how bad it is. But
For sure.
we've all heard crazy stories. So yeah. But for me, I think the main thing was the love of the game versus the results.
Yeah.
Did you quit when did you first quit your job? Like after you got successful with real estate, at what point did you leave?
Right before COVID, February 2020.
Yeah.
So right before my 27th birthday. So I was able to squeeze in financially free before 26,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's when I quit my job, went full into real estate, and man, I wish I did it earlier. Although then there's like the whole mortgage stuff where you can't qualify, et cetera. But like as soon as I was able to refi my fourplex, then I was out, and then I just went all into real estate, and then my annual income just skyrocketed because then I was able to go all in on real estate. So like all that time that I was giving essentially to somebody else, and all that energy and everything I had inside of me just went into my own thing, and that's when stuff exploded.
I think to your benefit, you'd already been in real estate for a little bit and built the equity up, where versus there's some individuals that got into flipping really quickly, flipped one home, made 250 grand, whatever, and they're like, this is like, I'm done working. This is it, I've left. And then it was great while it was hot, but those individuals are definitely spending it like, the watches, the cars, like it kind of happened to be those guys that made the money pretty quickly. Seemed like there was, in my opinion, I guess just from what I saw on social media, more majority that went into the quick, fast money lifestyle, flashy stuff. Some have maybe gotten smart about the ways they were spending their money and were able to pull out, but there was definitely a lot of them that,
the 2021 retirement parties.
And the ones that did make it through, like, are back at work now and are like working it. They're getting back into it. So
I remember those retirement parties.
yeah.
I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, it's too bad, man. But real estate, I mean, people know now, right? Real estate's not get rich quick. It's get rich for sure. Right? Everyone's heard, or many people have heard that.
Of course.
Get rich for sure, but it's definitely not get rich quick. And you have to love the game.
Absolutely.
Same with the gym, same with everything else, right? You can't like go chasing a six pack. You have to chase the hard work, which nobody wants to do.
Yeah, the food, the lifestyle, the sleep, the water.
Yeah, exactly. You have to love that stuff. The more you love the boring stuff, the more likely you are to get the sexy stuff.
Yeah, it's like everything you want is on the other side of the decision you don't want to make, Like it's all the hard things in life, whether it's eating your broccoli or like drinking your water or going to the gym or going to sleep. Every single great thing for you is hard and nobody wants to do it. Like that's the issue.
Right. But that's exactly why successful people who do those things become successful.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, oh, how did that happen? Well, because it did the thing that you didn't want to do.
Yeah. Over and over and over and over
Over
again.
and over, exactly. Right?
Yeah.
You didn't want to do it. You can't complain because you didn't want to do it. Or you can't say, this guy got lucky, or, oh, he's on steroids, or, I mean, maybe they are, but like, whatever. He's still grinding, right? Or maybe he like, it's daddy's money. Like, no, like it's more than likely the guy just worked for it, right? And
And, the opportunity, I'm not like, making excuses for the next generation or the younger generations behind us, but the opportunity is always in front of you. The opportunity was in front of us and it was hard. The opportunity was in front of our parents and it was hard.
Right.
And, it's getting increasingly more difficult. Like the opportunity, like the divide in classes, the divide in socioeconomic status. I read an article the other day was talking about the future of Canada in like 20 years and the limited ability to be able to move in social classes anymore or to acquire real estate. Like the best time to do something was yesterday, whether that's obviously in your life, in your relationships, but like especially in investing. We've even seen it firsthand in the short time we've been operating in the industry. Inflation and runaway inflation and debt cycles and printing money is going to inflate things. And this isn't doom and gloom or whatever, but like the for anybody listening, like the best time to do something was yesterday. Stop making excuses for it because it's not going to get any easier. We're already seeing capital move in the BRRRR continue to rise. You know, needing 500 grand or $1 million to play the game. You know, the average, you know, person doesn't have, you know, $1 million to play the game anymore. You know, you used to be able to go and buy, you know, a 5% down on a house, and, you know, you could kind of start from there. But even the average house is $500,000, $600,000. Like, it's getting more difficult.
For sure. Barrier to entry is definitely getting higher. Is it still possible? Absolutely. I think when there's a will, there's a way. It's kind of cliche, but like really, I think that's very true. Right now I have a deal that's totally, again, it depends who you ask, but this is a real deal that's recent. And I'm like, you know, this is more accessible to, you know, the average person than you would think. So I bought a duplex, side-by-side duplex for $325 in London. Market value is about 400. So right off the top, you make 75 off the equity, and it has a deep lot. So I'm looking at converting it to eight units. So the ARV should be around 2 million, right? Obviously, it's going to require 500K to reno, but you can finance that, right? So it's like, if you look at the actual capital required to do that deal, it's probably around 200, right? Which is obviously a lot. Like, I'm not going to come here and say, but if your ARV is 2 million and you're able to pull out $1 million out of it, now you just basically bought in for 200 and you're able to pull out $1 million at the end.
Yeah, you got two guys, 100 grand each. You know, you got to put the marbles on the table, though,
That's
right?
what I'm saying. Well, right, but like, you're fortunate where you have that mindset. You know, two guys, like that comes to you so natural. Two guys, 100 grand each, done, right? Like, most people don't have that mindset. They're focused on the results. They're focused on the PJs. They're focused on the Ferraris. Dude, if you focus on like, okay, let's get two guys, 100K each. We'll figure it out. Call up the build boys. Get construction financing in. Then like the ARV is high. Like, you get your money back. There's still a way to do it.
You have to really like associate that, not even associate, but like process the risk that goes along with it too, right? Like, to your point about like partnering, like you didn't partner, but your risk appetite was a little bit easier to handle, right? I mean, you put up a lot of risk, taking high leverage, private debt, collateralizing other properties to be able to get where you did to.
Right.
Or, if you wanted to take the partnership, there still is obviously a risk there, but you can spread out that risk a lot easier across partners.
For sure.
Versus having to take it all on yourself. So, I mean, if you're scared of taking the risk by yourself, there's definitely nothing wrong with bringing on a partner and spreading out that risk.
Agreed.
Obviously, you're leveraging a partner, your return is going to be split, or you take on all the risk, but you take on, all the profit at the same time.
For sure. I mean, just because I haven't got a partner doesn't mean I don't like necessarily agree with it. I think it's a good strategy, and one that, to your point, you might actually have to do. But I guess the main point I'm trying to drive is that it's still possible.
Yeah. It's
not impossible. Right before we started the filming, we're talking about the side-by-side 4s, 4x4, 8plex, and now you can go into commercial financing, which is now it's really scalable, right? So once you get into the 5+, like, see you later.
That was kind of where we saw like a massive growth of like your portfolio as well. Like, once you fundamentally understand the scalability issue, at the start of the conversation, you said, well, I had to get that 4plex done, because like that is based off of your income. But when you figure out, the debt facilities available to you to be able to continue to grow without necessarily needing your income to qualify,
that's right.
The world aligns. You start to realize like, oh man, there's a whole nother game here. Like, everyone's out here playing like checkers. I'm playing chess.
It's funny, to your point, you'll give me like a multi-million-dollar loan, based on debt servicing and based on like basically me as an operator, but it's hard for me to get 300K on a residential property, apples to apples, A to A, which really makes no sense. Well, but that's just how the game is. But like, again, I think the point you're trying to drive, I believe, is get into commercial, because then it's based on the debt servicing, right?
Well, yeah, it's just scalable,
It's way more scalable.
It's completely scalable, and we're seeing more people move into that space.
It's good.
Combining capital together, figuring out different strategies. We were just talking about the as of right zoning. That's happening in Toronto. You're gonna have 6 units on a single lot. You can have 5 in Toronto right now. Most municipalities are 4.
Right.
It's just being able to understand how to.
Look at Edmonton. Edmonton's 8.
Yeah, crazy.
8 units in a lot in Edmonton.
Right. Edmonton's a crazy market too.
Yeah, and they're building fourplex style like up down. So like, not only do you not need to have as large of a lot, you're still you're getting 2 to 4 more units per per lot. Obviously, Edmonton is. Are you overbuilding? That's a whole different conversation. But it is doable. I mean, we see it, right? And Toronto's going to get there. There's going to be 6 stories as of right eventually in Toronto. Like the opportunity is definitely huge right now for
sure
guys in the game. And a lot of people are leaving too, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who don't want to buy real estate in Canada anymore. They don't think it's viable, whatever. They're going down to the States.
Yeah,
that's fine. There's more opportunity for you now, right? There's less people in this space. Obviously there's some larger institutional guys that are getting more into the missing middle because they see it. But again, overall, with people leaving or people just not having the optimism about it, there's definitely more opportunity.
Yeah, agreed. I think Canadian real estate, especially multifamily, and especially in like more red tape provinces like Ontario, BC, like not going anywhere.
No,
not going anywhere, and especially with this, government definitely not going anywhere. I think inflation is going to continue going, and the upper investor class, whatever you want to call it, will continue getting wealthier, and then the like you said earlier, the classes will definitely continue spreading apart more and more.
We don't even have a federal budget. We don't need one, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
Holy.
But yeah, I think it's important to just take action. I mean, I've heard these things for so long. Surely you too, being in the space.
Of course.
But it might be someone's first time hearing, take action, right? Literally what I've done or what most people in real estate have done, like they're not necessarily like, launching like SpaceX, like they're just BRRRRing, like it's basically grade 6 math.
Yep.
If you understand grade 6 math and you don't get scared by the big numbers you're seeing on your screen, it's really not that challenging. Now, well, the concept of it is not difficult. The executions, that's where it comes.
All the money's in the execution of being an operator, though. Like,
exactly.
I know so many people who probably didn't go to university who are the most successful real estate investors that I've ever met.
Right.
And then guys were sitting there overcomplicating things, trying to sit down and like number it to death. The guys who make the most money in this business are the guys who make it happen. And like,
it's balls over brains.
That's
buddy.
it.
Well, how many guys started out real estate by it's not like I got into my first single family home when I hired a big development company to come in and do it. They were there scraping, tearing down walls, doing everything themselves late at night, after work, first thing in the morning, dealing with it. Like, well, you have to be able to find a way to do it.
Exactly.
You can do it.
I think there's levels to it, right? Like the typical, and this is similar to my story, is like, you start out swinging your own hammers, like learning how to, trim a wall and like how to apply drywall and how to like remove like, caulking and put it back on, like simple stuff. And then eventually you start hiring guys. And then eventually you start learning the leveraging of the financing side. This is where like, step kind of 3 territory. And once you have a portfolio going and everything's outsourced, then you fully are just moving money around.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like literally to an extent printing money because you just know how to leverage, you know how to push levers, push, pull, you know how to like where to invest, but it's basically just moving money around. And that's a stage that ultimately you want to get to. That's when you get freedom.
When value of asset is based off net operating income and like you can be a good operator, the value of your asset continues to increase annually. It's almost like you don't need to. You could sit there and be an operator forever and make money forever. And really the goal is as much gross income as possible because your 2.5% Ontario increase in gross income drastically translates into value over time. Mm-hmm. It even if you're in a good area, 5 cap, 5.5, 5.25 cap on that, you made $300,000, $400,000 on January 1st. Then the cash flow continues to come in every single month.
And another thing about multifamily, to your point, is you can add additional revenue streams than simply rent. Mm-hmm. Rent is the obvious one; that's your bread and butter. However, there's like advertising, there's parking, there's storage. There's bicycle storage, laundry. Mm-hmm. There's if you have a big enough building and it's set up for antennas on the roof, like there's additional revenue streams that are outside of rent that are going to make you some serious cash.
Well, that's where all the good developers find the inefficiencies in pre-existing buildings. Like,
right.
A lot of people are out there buying, looking to build brand new stuff now, but there's a big market out there of like older 70s style 3-4 story walk up buildings that are extremely inefficient.
For sure.
I know in your building you used individual metering. Taking a look at the cost of.
We have enough time to say all the things I did to that building. Jesus, that was it was over $1 million renovation.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into it if you want to talk about it. I mean,
for sure.
It's one of my favorite developments. I do a lot of deals, and it's still like one of those things where the stars align, and whether it's timing and debt and capturing different products. But yeah, we can absolutely get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So this building was a 32 unit building, the one we did about a year ago. So that was a 1 year turnaround period from bridge financing to exit. Basically, I looked at the spreadsheets and there were so many deficiencies.
Yeah.
This was basically a wealthy family. They didn't care. They were just making their cash flow. They had like 200 grand on the property. It was like basically paid for. They just didn't care. They were so checked out.
Padding expenses on the operating statement.
So just massive toilets,
Yeah.
right? So massive toilets, huge shower heads. I'm like, okay. So like water expenses right there. Each water meter had, or sorry, there was no water meters, but each unit had a cap for water. So you can easily add water meters, but they didn't. So right off the hop, it was like heavy water bill. They had this massive steam heater that was like super expensive.
The
I'm
only thing I've ever seen that. Actually,
Yeah,
a steam pipe
Yeah.
came out of the ground outside and it was pumping out steam.
Dude, it was infrastructure from the 1800s.
Yeah, wild.
Literally.
It was
And
an old
it's-
factory.
Exactly. So it used to be a shoe factory. It was converted into apartments, and I like what else? One big meter for 32 units, right? But each unit had its own panel. So again, it was already set up for separate meters, but it wasn't done. So I'm looking at this expense report, and I'm like, it's so high. It can be way lower. So that was on the expense side, and then on the income side, this was right downtown London. So it's like there's you can throw up advertising. The rents were relatively low. The tenant profile was okay, but it could be better. So anyway, I'll talk about this deal forever. But basically, it's like I completely renovated the whole thing. I added separate sub meters, new infrastructure throughout the whole thing. I lipsticked it to the nines.
Massive boiler
Exactly.
switch out.
So I got rid of that steam stuff. And by the way, there's no guys who can fix that. So that's a whole nother separate issue. But got rid of that. Got boilers in. Went MLI Select, and that was a very healthy exit.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. It's fully stabilized.
Yeah.
The building looks great. They're all loft. They all look like nice lofts. You had great tenant profile in there now. A lot of
They're
gentrification in the city. It's the definition of buying something in a place that's going to get better. You had brand new infrastructure beside it with the city just put in the bus station.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's near Via Rail in London, and I don't know what's going to happen to London. It might be a hub to Toronto, who knows? But I knew that I'm 32. I knew at some point in my life, as long as I live a regular life, lifespan, that train station will be our Union Station, whatever you want to call it. So I knew it was like a super hot spot. So that was another major reason why I bought it. But the increase in value, like the delta from acquisition to ARV, is very, very healthy. It was like 150% or something.
Yeah.
Well, the utility play is so great too, because not only are you just reducing your expenses, but you're obviously increasing how much money you're gonna get. But like the NOI play that you get there too, again, like going back to how you value it, right? Like for those that are considering a building that has high expenses with that option, yes, it's gonna cost you money, but you're increasing your cash flow, and just by increasing your cash flow alone too, you're also increasing the overall building value too. So it's a
Big time.
twofold play, and you
Big time.
can get in with energy efficiencies. And I mean, if you have a building too that you can qualify ahead of time, like you can refinance into CMHC for the purposes of doing the energy efficiencies. You don't always have to do it first, right? If the ability for the building to qualify is already there, but like the cash flow perspective, you can refinance or buy a building with the intents and purposes of doing the energy efficiencies afterwards. You don't always have to do it first, depending
Right.
on the setup of the building.
And a lot of people don't know, but it's actually a revenue source as well. So depending on the service that you want to do, there are companies out there that will provide you, revenue on a monthly basis as a business owner if you do individually meter them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they actually pitched me to have energy sub-metering in there, and that has a whole array of benefits. One of them you might not have thought of is actually they have dinners. So they invite all the developers. I'm basically the smallest fish there. You're talking like to the big guys. So that gets me literally in the same room with like, you know, the real heavies, like the guys who are building towers and stuff, right? So that was I didn't expect that one, but they invite me every year and like I go out there, that's fun. Yeah, what else did we do with that deal, man? We got we had to get like a crane, we had to get permits to block the road, to get cranes in there to paint the whole side.
You were getting juiced by the people who wanted to hold the sign.
Dude,
Bunch of scams along the way. You got to watch out.
But you know, going back to like falling in love with the boring stuff, it was just a year of just meat grinder, right? Every day for a year. Like a year in the grand scheme of things is not, I'll do that all over again, but like it takes a certain person to do that. Like it was a lot. And not to mention the craziness with the tenants, right? I had the SWAT team in there. I had a guy wanting to kill everyone. Like, you know, it was just, I had a guy who was sending me letters to my personal address because he's like a hate landlord type guy. Then he started sending letters to my mother, found out her name. Like you get some real weird stuff. So anyway, it was a grind, but you know, now we're at the other side of the tunnel.
You know,
Thank God.
When you're in it, like obviously, you know, it's stressful. You got so many things that are happening, but you know, looking back on it, it doesn't look like as intense as it was when you're in it. But obviously, everything's always 2020, right? You know, you go through all the processes and all the things you have to go through to be able to make it happen. You look at it, you're like, man, like that thing is mine now.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's done. Now it's just doing its thing, right? And you guys were huge on that, by the way, like the MLI stuff. Yeah. And now I'm just trying to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I'm still investing.
Doing a little development.
Exactly. So now I'm doing, well, like I said, I have 3. So I have 4 plex that I'm converting into an 8 plex. I have this duplex going to 8. And then I have a 15 unit townhouse complex that I'm converting into a 30. So basically each one has its own story, but I think the moral of the story is that I've pivoted my value add from, you know, turning over tenants to adding densification to properties. It lowers your risk because you don't have to deal. Like, it's crazy because your return on investment is literally reliant on the tenant's will to leave, which is crazy,
0.
right? Like, that makes that's a crazy thing to think about, but that's what it is. So instead of dealing with tenants and dealing with that whole side of things, I decided to pivot to densification. Now, the perks of it is that the value add's really good. The equity multiple, like the money you're going to get back on refis, should be very, very healthy. However, the downside is the time. So basically, you change from your stressor being tenants being stressful, which, you know, that's gotta be careful what we say here, right? But like, yeah,
We're
from being
Ontario,
stressed,
we understand.
exactly. To time, you got to practice your patience, right? Of
course.
And I'm talking like a year, right? So this project, the 15 unit townhouse complex, I had to get that rezoned. After rezoning, which was a challenge, by the way, because there was tenants living there. They put me on the news like 7 times. They're basically really fighting to stay, and I'm like, okay, you guys have unfinished basements, like it's being used as storage. Like, let a family live there because we were in a housing crisis, right? So that's an essential argument we made. We got it rezoned. After we got it rezoned, I have to go through site plan, which I'm going through right now, doing landscape studies, which is real fun. And then after that, I can go through permits. And then once the permits are in, then I can actually get this thing on the road, like get the actual construction going. One of the reasons why I liked it, as opposed to building fresh, is concrete's very expensive.
Yeah.
And when you have a basement, it's, you know, going back to the student housing days, I'm doing the same thing, just times 15, right? You're throwing up walls, you're adding a basement apartment, half the construction's already done. So it saves you a ton in costs and time.
It's like retrofit too, right? You're not ground up, like you're
exactly.
You're
and then it helps you on the financing side, which, for people who don't know, there's a new build category and then there's a retrofit category. Essentially, the retrofit category is a little more lenient, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I got it. So for those reasons, I'm doing that as opposed to building new. But yeah, I have that one. I have this duplex going to 8, going through a minor variance on that. And then I have the 4plex going to 8, which is a severance. So that one I'm severing. So that if you go through severance, you avoid site plan, you avoid, I think that's it actually, just avoid site plan,
Which is huge.
Huge, yeah.
Huge.
But yeah, it's a fourplex, identical on each side. So I'm separating the two, and I should have 4 and 4.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna come back to you guys, refi it. Same old, right?
Same old.
It's a BRRRR. It's tell me your story about your BRRRR. It all comes down to the BRRRR.
Except it's like a high level BRRRR now. You know, it's it's
creative.
It is extremely creative. You know, a lot of the opportunity that we're seeing in the mid space is exactly that: severance or semi-detached fours, tries. You know, falling in line with like the new commercial development space. It seems to be the main points here are like cutting development time. So if you can get something from acquisition to finished in like 12 to 15 months, you're probably not even gonna have site plan on your bigger property by then. You could have something completely done, refinance, capital out, moving on to the next one. So we're seeing a lot of this mid-sized stuff, but really just because of timeline and availability of capital. It's so much easier to be able to get like these smaller loans, especially right now when all the capital, these private capital firms, there isn't as many that like smaller loans, but when it comes to, environments like this where we have massive receiverships going on, it's much easier to be able to give a guy a few $1 million than it is to give a guy $10 million for a bigger project. So,
right. And they're diversifying.
Yeah, we're seeing the availability. Even a lot of like the big 5 banks are getting into sub $5 million, conventional loans now and insured loans. So they see that the activity right now in the space is far outweighs any sort of like larger activity. A lot of the big guys are kind of penciled down right now, but because it's your equity and your money, a lot of these guys have a burn on that capital. It's borrowed money, right? It's not real equity. A lot of it's borrowed money from other projects, and it has to be deployed. So people are moving capital still, but in a way in which still makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the rules I set out for myself is just to not over leverage ever. So I try to not go past 75. That's already my like top. I usually try to stay between 65 and 75. That's kind of the sweet spot for me. That's LTV throughout my whole portfolio. That's what's kept me on the safer side of things. But it's still leveraged enough where I could still scale, right? I'm just kind of pacing myself, And I don't care for the, what's that?
I was going to say, it's going to help you long-term too on like your renewals, like risk. Like one of the biggest things we see with like CMHC is you take, 5-year, 95%, you get your insurance premium on top, but in 5 years, like where are the bonds going to be at, and like what is the risk of renewal going to be at versus, even if you take that 5-year, but you're still at 75%, like you have room to play there within your financing. You're in a much safer position. You just cash flow better as well too. Like you'd be surprised how many mid-level guys get into like a 6 or an 8plex, they get 95%, and then after like a year or two, they're like, I didn't really make a whole lot of like cash flow on my building. It's like, well, because you're like debt servicing at 105 by the time your insurance premium comes in.
And I have no principal pay down.
You're all equity. You're not cash flow on this.
You got a lot of dreamers, eh?
Yeah.
Everyone's a dreamer. Well, I think you have to be a little bit of a dreamer to be a developer in this country.
Yeah.
It's a little. You got a little bit of sprinkle of crazy.
You gotta live on planet Earth too. You can't be dreaming too much. Because like you can't be doing 105. Well, not that you would like 105 is crazy,
That's what it comes out to. So your debt service at 1.1 in the MLI product before the insurance premium. So like
yeah, that's way too tight. I mean, I wouldn't. I suppose that maybe I'll do it if it makes sense, but I would really try not to.
Well, those are the people who again, like the opportunity was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
The requirement to take higher levels of risk the further we get down the path of like, higher value assets and more, equity required, it requires either people to have more cash or to take higher risk.
Right.
And also the benefit of not having partners. Like for you to be able to put your own capital in, you can dictate how much of that cash you have to pull out versus if you borrow and raise everything, at the end of the day, you have to leverage it to get it all paid back out.
Dude, and it's like,
unless they're willing to sit in the project with you.
It's like there's burn rates on all these things, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like it's not sexy, but like right now I'm losing a good amount of money. I keep it in reserves, right? So basically I have to just keep, let it. It's like James Fernandez says this, right? Like you just like throw it in a mountain of money and then you set it on fire and just like
time.
There's your time, right?
Yeah.
And that's very true. Like right now I'm just, through all this BRRRRing, I I've been able to have good reserves where I'm not super worried. But like it is like coming off the reserves. There was certainly a burn rate on all these developments. And, to some degree, I was like, man, I wish these things would move faster. But I'm like, at the same time, this is actually helping me because that means it's blocking everyone else.
Well, it's the barrier to enter, right? It is the capital required to be able to make it happen. And I hear it all the time. I wish it was easier. I wish it was faster. If it was easier and if it was faster, your value of your asset wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the very things that people complain about in Canada are the very reasons why it's profitable, right?
The biggest real estate bubble in the world.
Exactly. It's just getting through the bottleneck. It's a different game here, right? Once you're through the bottleneck, you're like, what's that guy's name? Evil Knievel, man. You shoot right through it, buddy.
Just going.
As long as you're in that little canyon, you call up Josh Finley at the end, boom, you're out.
Refinance. You're good to go.
But on a serious note, once you're through that, once you're through it, you're good.
What do you I think we're kind of wrapping it up here, but what do you think if you had to, all of our listeners, like they're doing lots of stuff. They're doing 4+1s, midsize multifamily, trying to figure out what to do. If you were starting out right now and you had to go back and say, like, what would you do right now to find the biggest opportunity in the market, man? What would you tell younger Carlos?
If I were to invest today?
Right now.
I would look at the difference between the acquisition value to the ARV potential. That's all that really matters. A lot of people focus on cash flow and the $1,000 every month or $500 or $200 or whatever every month, but really how you make money in real estate is equity. So if right now the opportunity is, as we've been discussing, densification, whether it's in Toronto or elsewhere, look at the delta from the starting point to the maximum amount of units that you can get on there. If you find a lot that you can go from one single family to 10 units or a duplex to an 8 unit in my example, that's what you want to buy because it's a lower barrier to entry. Again, mine was bought for $325. You buy that with 5% down. That's a fairly easy acquisition. And then you go through the city process to legalize it to be an 8. Then you go from there. That's what I would do. I would figure it out as I go, but I would acquire a property with a lot of potential to add units. Then step 2 would be to find the capital to make it happen, and then refinance at the end. Once you do one deal like that, it could change your life.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think that's great. Understand the intricacies of zoning, the type of debt you need to be able to structure a project like that, how much capital you need.
Yeah,
I think a project like that goes from either having it versus not. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing that maybe comes easy to us is the mindset. A lot of people have the wrong mindset, and it really starts with mindset. I would listen to books on changing your mindset, hanging out with people that are, and they're very, very, very rare to come across, but hanging out with the right people. Listening to the right podcasts, listening to the right guys on YouTube or whatever it is, but getting your mindset straight, and it all scales from there.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah. Absolutely. I'd same. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Carlos, appreciate your time. If people do want to follow you, the journey, you do post every now and again. Sometimes
I do.
How would somebody go about finding you?
Carlos.Afanadors. My last name is Afanador, so. I was tired of spelling A as in Apple, F as in Frank. So I'm like, no, it's Afanadors.
Love that.
You can follow me on Instagram and we'll chat there. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah.